American Edward Snowden, the man responsible for the biggest intelligence leak in U.S. history by exposing the mass surveillance activities of the National Security Agency, wanted for espionage in the United States. He continues to live in exile in Moscow, and now he's the focus of a major new film.
I love it. There's something going on inside the government that's really wrong, and I can't ignore it.
Snowden is directed by the acclaimed Academy Award winner Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone and historian Peter Kuznick sat down with me in New York to talk about the film and Edward Snowden on this special edition of The Heat. Peter Kuznick, welcome back to the show. Oliver, congratulations on the release of Snowden. I saw the movie. It's a fascinating movie about a very complex man. When we look at Edward Snowden right at the beginning of the movie, we see a young guy who has very conservative values. What do you think drove him from being this CIA worker, from being this worker for the National Security Agency, to becoming the man who leaked probably the biggest trove of documents, classified documents in U.S. history?
His father, his grandfather were military people, FBI also, they were serious. This is the average American outlook. This is what dominates our media. This is the way to serve your country, especially from the South. He was from North Carolina, and he worked his way at the age of 21, 22, after the military, into the CIA. No high school education. So he wanted to serve after 9/11. He felt strongly about the Iraq War, was correct. He was, I would say, though, more libertarian in his views, you know, in his early stages. Then he met his girlfriend, it becomes a 9-year relationship. And in the course of those 9 years, he goes to various posts like Geneva, then he goes to Japan, and ultimately to Hawaii, where he sees things that are shocking to him, shocking in its blithe disregard for the Constitution. I suppose as a fundamentalist, he's a Constitution. He believes highly in the Constitution. And when his loyalty is to that, it's an interesting idea, by the way, and then, but not to the NSA. In other words, he pledged loyalty to the Constitution, and legally he is correct. When your boss is breaking the law constantly, and he sees it in a mass surveillance way, global system that no one could, I mean, no one really believed it until it happened, until it came out. And they still don't believe it, because it's much worse than we think. It's much bigger than we think. Anyway, when he finds that out, plus the fact that his girlfriend has more liberal instincts than he has, plus the fact that he had epilepsy, he discovered the epilepsy at a time when he was very crucial. His tension level went way up in Maryland before he moved to Hawaii. And I think if we never know the origin of epilepsy, his mother had it, but it comes out all of a sudden. I think it's a spiritual sickness. It's a physical ailment, but it signifies a spiritual tension in him.
I want to bring Peter in, but Oliver, let me ask you this. You have a reputation in your career as a movie director for taking on big issues, big names, you know, J.F. Kennedy, Nixon, the Vietnam War. This project, the Snowden project, you initially turned it down. Why is that?
I don't want to get involved in chasing the news. I mean, that's your job. I mean, I can't. A movie takes a year, 2 years. It's a huge amount of money. It's an investment of that kind. You cannot chase the news because it changes all the time. The interpretations change. So my instincts were, no, I'd had too many things blow up in my face. You know, I tried to do a movie about the My Lai massacre. That was many years ago, but that even was too controversial. I tried to do a movie about King. Don't chase the news. In other words, find subjects you feel comfortable with, get to know them. I waited until Nixon died. He had died a year before. I'd heard that he didn't want the film to be made, but his family was very upset. But frankly, that's the only way you can go about something without being sued, without getting public pressure. However, in this case, the story is too important to walk away from. And after meeting him and going back, I met him 3 times before we committed to the screenplay. We decided to go the realistic route and do as good a screenplay as close to reality as we could.
And then
to
you
the
met him
drama.
several times during the making of the movie?
I went back ultimately 9 times to Moscow.
Peter, how significant is a movie like Snowden in this era that we're living in right now, where there is mass surveillance, where there is this massive amount of intelligence gathering?
It's a frightening situation if you realize how pervasive this surveillance is, how little privacy we have left. And for somebody like Snowden to come on the scene and to reveal this at enormous personal risk, right? He didn't know if he was going to be shut down before he got a word of it out. He didn't know if he was going to be assassinated. He's threatened with spending most of his life in jail. So he took that risk because he believed so deeply that it was essential that the people understand the degree of surveillance. And the fact that Oliver can take this. Now, Oliver, I was listening because Oliver has some real insight into that process, because Oliver, in some ways, was like a young Snowden, much more conservative, joined the military, volunteered for combat in Vietnam, only person probably in the history of Yale to drop out of Yale to volunteer for combat in Vietnam. And then as he went through the process and started to learn more and see more of the world, his ideas began to change. Snowden goes through a similar kind of process in a shorter period of time when he's confronted with that reality. So the fact that Oliver, and uniquely, and probably only Oliver, could bring this to the screen to an audience of hundreds of millions, we hope, around the world, is a tremendous service. It's already changed the conversation.
Right, and Oliver, the movie does tell us a lot about Snowden the man, Snowden the person, and all the emotions that he goes through as he is telling the world about these things that the United States government is doing. You did an interview with USA Today, the newspaper here in the United States, and you told them, and I'm quoting here, that this was a painfully difficult movie to make. Why was it difficult?
Well, first of all, having the right information is because so little has been written about the National Security Agency. There's been 3 books by Jim Bamford, who I talked to extensively. There was some revelations from Bill Binney back in 2000 when he protested against what was going on, the mass eavesdropping. Then there was Thomas Drake affair, which was a very important affair but it revealed to us that even a senior level officer of the NSA could not go through legal channels because he was actually charged by the government with the things that he revealed. In other words, they went after him because of his revelations instead of airing those out in a general complaint. He went to court, his life was ruined, and charges were essentially dropped, except for 1 misdemeanor.
Peter, there are those who have called Edward Snowden a traitor, and they make the argument that, yes, there is mass surveillance, but it has saved lives. We need this in the post-9/11 era. What do you say to them?
I say that it's nonsense. First of all, they make these claims, how the mass surveillance has stopped all these terrorist attacks. First, they come out and say, well, they stopped 54 terrorist attacks and we can prove it. Then people investigate. They whittle it down and say, well, it stopped 12 terrorist attacks. Finally, they found out that they exposed the fact that somebody sent $8,500 to Somalia, and that's what they come up with. It's sort of like what happened with the torture report recently. You know, they claim that torture gave us all this incredible information, and then when they begin to actually investigate, scrutinize, they find that got nothing out of the torture. The same thing with the surveillance. So they do make that claim repeatedly, but we haven't seen any of the evidence to support that.
Oliver, there is a scene in the movie where one character says, Americans are not concerned about security. They're concerned about freedom. They're concerned about security. The implication there being that you can't have both.
I think that's a false equation, and it's used all the time, but I don't get it because they're not providing them security. It's a bargain made with the devil. You don't want to make it. And furthermore, we didn't have any consent in it. We were just told that your life is more important than anything. It's for the public good. We are protecting your life. But in return, we have to be able to pull whatever liberties we feel are necessary. They don't even tell you how or what they're thinking. It was what Hitler did in 1933 when he came to power. Bill Binney's pointed that out. There was a we promise you security, but we need your loyalty, and we need to protect you, but we can't tell you exactly what it is. So it's a bad deal.
Right, you talk about the fact that you are reluctant to chase the news and make a movie like Snowden.
Yeah.
What are the challenges then of making a movie that is critical of United States policy?
Well, that I've been critical of for a long time because of the, as you know, the Vietnam movie started it. The Salvador movie is very important to me because it was the 1980s
We
when I
haven't seen a
woke
movie.
up to.
We haven't seen a movie that's critical of the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan.
I have not made that. Although I did do W about Mr. Bush, and I showed some of the thinking behind that. You know, it was not about national security. It was, and we also, the character in our movie, Rhys Ifans plays,
Right.
who's a senior official, talks about it being a horseshit war for sand and oil. And he talks about the real threat to America will come from China, from Russia, from Iran with sequel injections of malware, he says. This is cyber warfare. And this is the American way of thinking. Create a threat, exaggerate it, and then you continue to build up this military-industrial security complex.
Well, it's softening up public opinion, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And manipulating it. As Noam Chomsky says very well, you know, manufacturing consent.
Peter, we are now living, or appear to be living, in this world where it's a free-for-all environment as far as mass surveillance is concerned. Anything goes. The US government is complaining bitterly right now about what Snowden has done. But is it the US government that started all of this, that set the precedent?
Yes, the U.S. government does set the precedent. We can actually trace this back historically. Right? The first surveillance campaign began in the Philippines in 1901. It was Captain Ralph Van Diemen, who's known as the father of U.S. military intelligence, who started it in the Philippines as part of our crackdown against the popular uprising there. Then during World War I, Van Diemen sets up similar programs in the United States for surveillance of Germans and for and radicals. And then we use that as the basis for the Palmer raids to crack down on dissent after World War I. We expand the program during World War II. Even Franklin Roosevelt's record on this is not unblemished. So in 1940, he lets Hoover loose to go after more surveillance. We put almost 120,000 Japanese Americans in the concentration camps as part of this kind of crackdown during World War II. But then it heats up much more during the Cold War, during McCarthyism, the surveillance, and then it jumps to a new level in the 1960s and to stop the anti-war movement in Vietnam and the civil rights movement. So we've got these COINTELPRO operations on a much larger scale with hundreds of thousands of people being surveilled as part of this with wiretaps and break-ins and all kinds of phony tricks that were going on during that time. Yeah. So we just keep on expanding. And finally, now we have this signals intelligence, we've got this electronic capability, and we've got this drone capability, and we put this all together in the battlefields of Iraq under McChrystal, and so we've got a whole new world now. I mean, if you put it in historical context, the capability that the United States has now is so vast, so pervasive, so invasive, that there really is nothing they want to know everything.
Okay, we are going to take a break right now, more with Oliver Stone and Peter Kuznick. When we come back, we're going to leave you now with an excerpt from the movie Snowden. Welcome back. We're talking about the new film Snowden. With me is director Oliver Stone and historian Peter Kuznick. Oliver, I want to read you a headline that's in the Washington Post. It says, "Can Oliver Stone's Snowden convince the world that its subject is not a traitor?" There's been lots of talk in the United States.
That's a rhetorical question.
Right. But there has been lots of talk in the United States about a possible presidential pardon for Edward Snowden. There's an article in the New York Times, an opinion piece by the heads of both Human Rights Watch as well as Amnesty International. We have Bernie Sanders, the former Democratic presidential candidate, now saying Edward Snowden should get a pardon. Edward Snowden himself is saying he should get a pardon. Should President Obama give Edward Snowden a pardon before he leaves office?
Well, first of all, just, you see, that's the problem with media in the country, is that none of these people have seen the movie. Right. And that's the key, that's what the object is. I mean, to see the movie, to understand a bit more about the situation. So everyone has to take a position before the movie comes out, before they see it, and they all take these, let's call them stock positions. I mean, all the people who would want him to face a long prison sentence don't change an iota because they haven't even bothered to see the movie. This is a real problem in media because they always want to get ahead of the news and the next person by getting ahead of the story, but it's too far ahead. I advise you, all viewers, just cool it, see the movie, then decide for yourself. It was not made for activist or political reasons. It was made as a drama. I'm telling a story. I want it to work. I don't want, if you walk out of here and I feel the same, that's fine, but at least perhaps you're a little more conscious. So in that regard, I didn't take an official position. Yes, of course, personally as a citizen, I'd like to see him pardoned. Yes, but I know more perhaps than most people. See the movie, make up your own mind.
Peter, if there's no pardon now, what are the chances of Edward Snowden being pardoned by, let's say, a Hillary Clinton being president or Donald Trump being president?
Not good. Not good. I think we've got a better chance under Obama than we do under Clinton or Trump. Obama at least claimed to be the transparency president. He said he was going to reverse many of the policies under Bush. What Obama's done, unfortunately, is double down on most of those policies, legitimize a lot of the things that we hated about the Bush presidency. So under all previous presidents, between 1917 and 2008, 3 people were prosecuted under the Espionage Act. Obama has now prosecuted 8 under the Espionage Act. So, but when we get to Trump and Clinton, the picture is even worse. Clinton has said that Snowden has to come back and face the music, stand trial here. What she doesn't say is that he can't defend himself here. Under the Espionage Act, he cannot make a public interest defense. He cannot say that what he did was in the public interest. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, says that Snowden performed a public service. He even admits it now, but Snowden can't defend himself that way. It was a bit of a nuanced
statement there from Eric Holder. He said Snowden performed a public service by creating this debate.
Yes, yes. But he has, and even Obama's acknowledged that,
right, that
he's created this debate and that's been public service. Trump has called him a traitor. So I think we have a much better chance under Obama, a constitutional law professor who's a reasonable person, than we would, I think, under Clinton or Trump, unfortunately.
Oliver, do you think Americans have any sense of the scale of intelligence gathering that is going on in this country right now? Or do you detect that there's too much complacency? There's just acceptance of what is happening.
Yes, there is. They have no idea of how deep this thing has gone. I mean, there's the money that we're spending on the security state is upwards of $50 billion. Most of it is civilian, goes to the civilian side, CIA and FBI and DEA. But no, this is serious violation, serious violation. And it's been called so by several judges, but several others have supported the state. So it goes back and forth. We haven't. People have not been informed, and that's not the purpose of all this thing. As Snowden said, we're not fighting terrorism. We're maintaining social and economic control of the world.
Peter, we see in the movie that a number of U.S. laws are broken, that the U.S. Constitution is violated in many respects. But we have not seen prosecution.
Well, when Obama took office, we were hoping he was going to prosecute Bush and Cheney and others for a long list of crimes, breaking America's laws, breaking international laws. And Obama said, we want to look forward, not look backward. And to not hold people accountable is very, very serious. It allows people to get away with things with impunity. And that's been the situation. And I think it's creates very, very dangerous precedent. And it's unfortunate that Obama has not been willing to actually confront people with their law breaking.
Oliver, I want to get on to the U.S. election right now. We're right in the middle of these campaigns that are going on. What do you make of either Hillary Clinton presidency or Donald Trump presidency?
I try to dial it out. I mean, frankly, neither candidate has addressed surveillance state, much less the issue of Ed Snowden. But this is the key. The surveillance state itself is analyzed, and it keeps going and gets bigger and bigger. And then on top of it, look at what they've said. They've said nothing about America's wars, except to basically support the military. They've said nothing about climate control. This is a debate that is frankly trivial. It's about personalities and shaming the other person, this, that. I'm not particularly interested. I think the problems will persist for us, and until we face them, we're avoiding.
Is that also perhaps because there is a lack of interest on the part of the American voting public?
Who says that? I mean, who says that? The networks, the media, the way they guide the debate? Who asks the questions at these debates? I don't. The media is complicit in this, in the sense that they're fine with not disturbing the American public, because disturbing the American public is not good for advertising.
Peter, what's your view on that?
My view on the election is that we've got two terrible candidates. It's understandable why they're so unpopular and so mistrusted, but they're not equal in my mind. I see Hillary Clinton as very hawkish, very militaristic, a woman who has not been able to find a single war she can't embrace. But I still find her a more attractive choice than Donald Trump, who strikes me as completely irrational. I mean, it's sort of the warmonger versus the madman. And in that situation, I'd rather have the warmonger's finger on the nuclear button than Donald Trump's finger on the nuclear button. He sometimes is right on certain issues, at least from my standpoint. I agree with him on some of the issues, but I don't trust that he's going to actually act in that way, because he's on all sides of all issues, depending on what the mood is and which day it is. But so Clinton, I think we know what we're going to get. Some of it's very dangerous. No-fly zone in Syria could put us in direct military confrontation with the Russians. I don't want to see that, and that could be very dangerous. Her Asia pivot policies were, I think, very misguided. So there's a lot of things that I'd mistrust there, but I at least see her as a rational actor who's going to do things I don't like. But Trump, I have no idea, and I think it's just the stakes are too high. It's too dangerous to risk a Trump presidency.
Hobsons Choice. Oliver.
That's a very well said. Hobsons Choice was a wonderful movie by David Lean with Charles Lawton. Do you ever see it?
That's right, I did.
You have to make choose between his daughters.
Getting back to what we were talking about, Oliver, the Washington Post again reports that U.S. intelligence agencies are expanding their spying operations against Russia. It's bigger now than at any time since the Cold War. What is this likely to lead to?
War. It's ugly. I worry about cyber warfare more than nuclear warfare. I think it was the new boundary we crossed at in 2007. We implemented a policy of offensive warfare against Iran with Israel. The Stuxnet virus did not work. Actually, it was picked up on. It went to other countries and it was discovered. And Iran rebuilt its centrifuges in 6 months, so it didn't solve anything. On the contrary, it announced to the world that we're engaging in a new offensive. It was somewhat similar, in a quiet way, to dropping the atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
And now we have Russia, which it's been dragged into the election campaign.
Of course,
Accusations.
And there's no proof, and there's been none presented. On the contrary, some of the highest officials have said we can't jump to conclusions. Think about it. The Stuxnet virus, it took how many months to discover what it was? It was, I believe, I met one of the researchers. He said it took 7 months of work. It takes time, and cyber, that's what's dangerous. You make these wild accusations. Russia did it, so forth and so on. China, Iran. Next thing you know, the public is all heated up by the media. No one will know where the next war will start and how. No one will know who started it.
Peter, where does it all go to from here? We see Russia being accused of hacking the computers of political parties here in the United States.
That's the danger, is that there's so much misinformation out there. You've got a public that's being manipulated, and this demonization of Russia that's going on in the United States now is very, very dangerous and ill-advised. Putin is not Stalin. Putin is not Hitler, although he's been compared by Hillary Clinton. So Putin is just a Russian nationalist who thinks that Russia has legitimate national security interests. The United States denies that Russia has any legitimate national security interests. One of the things we show in Untold History is that the United States promised Gorbachev in 2000 that NATO would not expand one thumb's width to the east if we allowed the unification of Germany. And what do? We've now expanded 12 nations to the east. We've gone up to Russia's doorstep, and George Bush says Ukraine and Georgia are potential NATO candidates. So, or we push Russia with the EU deal in Ukraine. So we're pushing them up against the wall and thinking they're not going to respond, when of course they're going to respond in the ways that they understand and to defend their national interest. So I see this demonization of Putin and vilification of Russia as very dangerous, as Oliver said. You know, the risk of war is real at this point.
Right. And Oliver, there are reports that your next project is going to be on Vladimir Putin.
It's not a project in terms of a film. I've been working on a documentary. And in the vein of my other documentaries, just trying to show the American public and the world public, you know, if they are our enemy, let's talk. Let's see what they're about.
We've been talking about mass surveillance. There are also the dangers of drone warfare, cyber warfare. Is there a danger here that this could become the new normal?
It is a new normal now. The question is, will it lead to even more escalation of cyber warfare and ultimately some form of nuclear warfare? Concern. The hope, I have hope in sanity. Between Khrushchev and Kennedy, they made a deal at the crucial moment. Putin seems to me to be a reasonable man, very interested in Russian national security, but not with any other ambitions. And I think Mr. Obama, at least he is a rational man. And cyber treaty is necessary. A cyber treaty is most necessary at this point in time. Snowden has been calling for it. I wish there was a surveillance treaty we could make with the world. And it's possible, but it's probably harder to do. And but all treaties are possible. Remember, Mr. Nixon went and signed a treaty with the Russians, the ABM treaty in '72, was it? And it was a crucial barrier to war until George Bush actually rescinded the treaty in 2004. So treaties are possible. Diplomacy can win and keep us out of war.
Oliver Stone, Peter Kuznick, thanks for joining us. And that's it for this special edition of The Heat. Thanks for being with us.